what we're going to talk about is basically around this topic, teaching the census through GIS, and it's a combination of a few different organisations, and we'll introduce them in a minute. But, the first thing I think we wanted to do is just introduce ourselves. So my online pseudonym is Geography Paul, and I sort of tweet and blog just like everyone else. Last year I published this book called Teaching Geography in a Digital World, so IT is a kind of big interest of mine. I used to teach at a school over in Kent that was teaching the IB, and I've just moved to another school now where it's sort of quite innovative in the sense that beyond the core subjects we don't do GCSEs, and I have come up with my own alternative to GCSE and pretty much have the freedom within the school to teach and assess what I want. And then...
Yeah, hello, I'm Adam, and I'm a lecturer at UCL, and I teach, well, I run, in fact, here's another slide. Yeah, there we go. I run one of the hundreds of MSc courses in UCL, but the course I run is MSc in Smart Cities and Urban Analytics. What the course is essentially a kind of a spatial analysis, sort of data analysis GIS sort of course, and I teach geographic information systems in science, and I've been doing that for a few years now. My background is actually as a sort of geographer, and I did teach in secondary schools for a little while. That didn't last as long as Paul has, and probably many of you in this room. So I have an interest in sort of getting the sort of stuff we do at universities introduced much earlier in the sort of the career of people who are interested in doing sort of geography and in sort of spatial science. Because what I've learned sort of being a university teacher is actually a lot of the stuff we teach is not particularly difficult and unachievable by sort of students at school level. It's just that they haven't done it before, and so we're having to kind of catch up. So I work in CASA, which is the Centre for Advanced Spatial Analysis, which is a fairly small department in UCL. We were founded in 1995 by Professor Mike Batty, and we do kind of spatial science and sort of that kind of stuff. It's sort of quantitative geography, effectively, one of these in that way. So Paul took a few pictures.
Yeah, partly. Before we get onto the project and the kind of basis of all of this, it was a really good chance as a teacher to go and visit this university department. And I'll talk a bit more about those sorts of links in a minute, but CASA is quite a cool place based on Tottenham Court Road in London. And we'll show you some pictures. There were some really interesting projects and sort of cool toys there as well.
Yeah, so sort of behind these sort of big polystyrene CASA letters, these were for an exhibition we did at Grand Designs Live a couple of years ago. Behind that, those dials that you see, that's a tweeter meter. It's in the British Library for a while. One of our researchers in CASA, he built this thing that kind of effectively little dials on it. Each dial represents a city in the world, and he was collecting tweets on cities in the world and then displaying how many people were tweeting at any point in time in each city. So it was a kind of a fun thing for the British Library. They were doing a sort of a data science sort of exhibition a few years ago. Yeah, when you come into the CASA office, there's a whole various things kind of all over the place. It's got a bit of a sweet shop for sort of digital tech and toys and things. We've got over here, this is our London data table. So we managed to cut out a table in the shape of London, and we project live data feeds onto that table coming in from sort of various bits of the city. I think on this one, yeah, so they have things like traffic flows and sort of buses and that kind of stuff get projected on there. So it's, again, just sort of different ways of kind of conveying digital information about our city. Here's this little exhibit here. This was an experiment, an agent-based modelling experiment. So effectively, we projected onto this table these little kind of eyeballs of agents, and they have rules about how they move around. And you can kind of think of them a bit like people in a crowd. And so there are some people in CASA that do crowd modelling, how people walk through spaces. So this was a kind of an experiment. So you can put these physical houses on the table, and the little agents would kind of bump into them and then sort of move around and things like that. It's kind of experimental sort of stuff, which has sort of real world applications at the time.
The data table, though, I think is one that's really transferable for schools, because I kind of came back from there thinking, oh, there's so much stuff that we could do as a school. So we've cut off a template like that for our local area of Dun Hampshire, and then it's so easy to then just put a projector above it and things like the Flight Radar 24 to be able to then project onto it. So you just need to be able to have a down projector.
Yeah, a bit more tech, a bit more catalytic. So on the right here, this is our again, one of our researchers built this for the mayor's office. Boris Johnson had this in the city GLA offices in London for a while. So this is effectively it's the data that we have on here, kind of projected and made into a sort of physical thing. Each of those little squares on there is an iPad, and we had a bit of spare cash for iPads in the office. So the one of the researchers built this sort of live. Again, it's a sort of dashboard for various kind of data feeds in London specifically, so the mayor was kind of wanting to keep an eye on what was happening in the city. So it's pulling data effectively from this website, so things like the tube status, so you've got whether one of the tube lines goes down at some point. We've got things like the kind of air quality, temperature, various things like traffic cameras as well. You can sort of project the various different traffic cameras and things. So sort of dashboardy kind of stuff. Yeah, other things that you might come across if you were to come into CASA, we've got this here was a pigeon simulator. Effectively, it was an Xbox Connect, and it kind of tracks your movements, and you could kind of flap your arms like a pigeon, and you could fly around Google Earth and sort of fly around cities and kind of. It doesn't work anymore because Google changed their API, and you can't use it anymore as a thing. But, yeah, that's sort of some of the stuff that Paul kind of came across when he came to visit in CASA. Yeah, so what are we going to talk about today? How this came about was we were both contacted. Well, I was contacted. Did you contact the RGS?
Yeah, I contacted them.
Yeah. So every year the Royal Geographical Society has available for teachers and anyone who's interested 2 grants to develop teaching resources with a partner in higher education. Based on a particular topic that they have in mind at that point in time. So £1,000, which sort of pays for a bit of travel to and from where you're going, a little bit of your time, things like that. And they really want to kind of make connections between higher education and the secondary education. And so it's a kind of facilitating grant. I think the deadline is 15th of February every year. So if you put that date in your diary, it's worth kind of looking on the Royal Geographical Society's website and looking at what next year's grants are going to be. I can't remember when they announced them, but they put it up there, and you can then apply. I don't know if Paul can tell you any more about the application process.
Well, it was just a form that you fill in. What we'll talk about in a second a bit more as well is that the idea is that the RGS help to facilitate the connecting, so you don't have to have someone that you know of. I just expressed an interest, and they said, oh, we've got Adam, who is someone who is interested in then working together with someone. But you can see here that the themes, I think they're meant to be topical, and the idea was the 2014 one was linked to this first release of the 2011 census data, where there was a big dump of data, and then 2015, it was all about international development.
I'm not sure what 2016 was. But, yeah, so the 2 projects that were funded in 2014, the first project was this one based around London Mapper. So Ben Henning, who works with Danny Dorling at the University of Oxford, he does lots of work on cartograms, which are these kind of maps where you adjust the boundaries of the areas that you're interested in according to some sort of variable that's underlying the data that you're displaying. So they developed some resources around Ben's London Mapper website, which was good resources. They're on the RGS website now. You can kind of pick those up. We like to think that ours was a bit better. We kind of went a bit further. So we actually, as part of our resources, we will show you. Click on the next slide. We will actually show you how to make these cartograms yourself. So cartograms are brilliant. They're good fun, but you see them a lot, but you don't really don't often see how you can go about making them. We thought we could go a bit further and actually empower people to kind of create their own sort of resources. This is actually very, very easy to do, and it's part of one of our lessons. You can create these things, get your students to create these things, and they're quite fun.
Yeah, I think that's one of the overriding themes, is a lot of the time as a teacher, you end up using something someone else has created, or your students just look at something. So there's a website that displays the data and they look at it. What we're trying to say is that, especially at A level, they should be making it themselves, and actually it's quite easy to make it, and that's what sort of our project's all about. One of the big things that came out of this project that I wanted to kind of convey as well, and I'm sure people like Richard knows about this as well. Often you can see yourself as a school as a bit of an island, but actually there's so many organisations that want to link with you. So this project was really good to link with universities, and since I've pretty much every topic we teach tried to link it with university. So we do health, and I've linked up with a lecturer from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and she does a Skype lecture, and I've got some data from some other organisations as well. So the GA, RGS, there's lots of kind of work that they want to do with schools. There's all of the NGOs who either have data or resources, or they're really keen to have that connection. And then also you've got the Met Office, Ordnance Survey, Environment Agency, that either it might be data or it might be a person that might come to the school. But I think a lot of these organisations are looking for schools, but it's difficult for them to go out and find them. It's easier for you to contact them. So I think that's something I've learned, is be confident to just go and email or ask or ring, and often the academics in particular are really receptive.
So, yeah, I guess moving on to the motivations behind this particular project that we're going to be talking about today. I think with the release of the 2011 census data, I think the Royal Geographical Society were aware that we have this exceedingly rich spatial data resource. The amount of social science that goes on in the United Kingdom based on the census is overwhelming. I mean, there are so many fascinating, useful, kind of real sort of relevant pieces of research that are done with census data. But very frequently, this sort of stuff doesn't make its way into the classroom. And part of the reason for this is, knowing where to begin can be quite tricky sometimes. You get kind of, you go to a census data website and you've got hundreds of tables and kind of millions of variables, and it's where do I begin? How do I start to make sense of this? So one of the motivations, I think, for the RGS, but also for us, was helping to kind of convey to teachers, to users in secondary schools, that it might appear daunting, but actually if you can sort of take it step by step, it's not as difficult as it first appears. And so I think we were really kind of keen to try and get people a sort of a leg up, if you like, into this sort of really rich and powerful data from the census. The other motivation is that quantitative methods are becoming increasingly important. Certainly at universities, I can sort of speak from a university perspective, although Paul will be able to talk from the school's perspective. But within universities and within geography kind of degrees in the UK, quantitative methods are part of some degrees, but they're certainly not central to a lot of geography degrees in the UK. There are some universities where quantitative methods are more of the thing, so places like Leeds and Liverpool and UCL kind of have fairly kind of strong quantitative kind of elements to their degrees, but places like sort of Durham and sort of Cambridge, places like that, have much less of a kind of focus on quant methods. So people coming out of UK geography don't necessarily have quantitative skills when they go into teaching. And as a result, it can be a bit daunting. If you've not learned these skills at university, then where to begin can be a bit daunting. But it really shouldn't be, because I did a geography degree. I was a geography teacher for a bit. I did maths at GCSE. I didn't do maths at any other point since then. And I've kind of picked up these quantitative skills as I've gone. And as I've done it, I've kind of realised that actually it's hugely empowering to be able to use these data and to kind of critique them and analyse them and carry out analyses. It's extremely powerful, and it's increasingly becoming so in the modern world. So data science jobs are all over the place at the moment. I teach master's students, and they come to us to learn the sorts of skills, and they go away and they go into kind of industry, and I don't think any of our students don't get jobs at the end of it. These are very marketable skills, and increasingly as data is becoming more and more prevalent in the world, these things are really important. But geography is massively in a sort of strong position to be able to lead the way on this. But just the nature of the kind of the stuff that we do and the kind of the breadth of the subject means that we're in a really good position to do this. There is a push in the universities now to kind of increase quant methods teaching in geography. There's new Q-STEP initiatives which are funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, so it's starting to become more of a thing in universities. But when students arrive at universities, they often don't have the sort of basic quantitative skills. If they've done a kind of geography, history, French or something like that for their A-levels, they won't necessarily have these skills, and so we're having to introduce them. But it would really help us a lot if a lot of this stuff was learned earlier on and we could get onto the more interesting stuff. So that was another motivation for this work. Should I talk about?
Well, yeah, no, we're coming from the kind of perspective as well, but we're big supporters of sort of open source and free, and I know that there's lots and lots of backing for products that you have to pay for, and I think a lot of people have this impression that GIS is expensive. Well, actually, it's not. You don't have to spend any money at all. So the packages that this whole project is based around is QGIS, which is a sort of open source free one that you can download. I know with my school, we've just had it downloaded on all computers and it's really easy to do. So it's not a web-based one, but equally there's pros and cons. The other package then, which is a bit more advanced, that Adam knows more of, is R and R Studio.
Yeah, so we don't touch on this in our resources, but it's probably something to be aware of as a resource. It's pretty much the de facto kind of software that universities are kind of teaching statistics and kind of data analysis with these days. It's a little bit more of a challenge to kind of pick up the basics, but I think very soon you'll start to see bits of R coming into school, and you can actually do lots of GIS and lots of mapping and things with R. It's really powerful. I should say that sort of with QGIS, it's an unbelievably good piece of software. A lot of my colleagues in universities use QGIS by default now rather than using Esri products. It's really it's come on leaps and bounds in the last few years. It's got a huge development team, sort of hobbyist kind of GIS people across the world, and they're constantly kind of updating it and releasing new versions. When I was a school teacher briefly, we didn't have anything like QGIS, and so teaching GIS in schools was impossible. Now, this is free. It's kind of what we're using in universities. It's available cross-platform. You can use it on any computer you like. You don't have to have a Windows machine or a Mac or Linux or anything like that. So we can really start making sort of inroads into teaching sort of some really quite sophisticated skills at a much earlier stage these days. There's not the financial barrier that there was previously.
The other thing we were going to say as well is that in terms of support, that's often one of the big things is this Esri, there's a whole education team. But the thing is with QGIS is that you can just go on Google or you can YouTube, and there's so many supporting things. So in terms of a teacher saying, well actually, there's no one there to support me, just like anything in life, you YouTube it, Google it, and you find the solution. So there's definitely not an argument not to use it. So this sort of last motivation is, I think with the changes to the A-level course, there's even more motivation to bring these skills in. I think I've spoken to a lot of teachers who have shied away from it. Partly they've either said, I've not got the skills myself, or they've said, well, they get taught at university, why should I be teaching it now? And I think the reality is that you can teach geography through these things, and that's the way you need to see it. Is this whole project is based around teaching a geographical concept, the idea of inequality, looking at health, using GIS and quantitative skills. And I think where geography is being seen as a lot of these statistical and kind of quantitative skills, and it's coming across from maths, and we're taking more of that on, this sort of thing has a lot of potential. And you can see there at the bottom, with the field work as well, a lot of these GIS skills underpin the field work. And if you can get your students to, maybe if they did this before they did a piece of field work, it would benefit them in terms of sourcing secondary data, and lots of the skills that they learn from this are transferable to any of the sort of field work that you might do. So this was sort of how it all began. It began with a phone call. I think I was in the classroom and we just had a sort of 15-minute chat, bringing together the sort of basic ideas. And then that led to a few days where I went up to London and we worked in an office in Casa, and then Adam came down to Kent when I was working over there, and we sort of worked together on these resources. So there was sort of days spent behind a computer working on this.
Yeah, it's a very collaborative process. I think we sort of sat down. We knew that our brief was essentially to do something using the census data. And I don't even think GIS was necessarily part of what we were supposed to do, but I think both of us had an interest in GIS, and I think from my own sort of experience as a sort of academic, analysing census data and using GIS to do this, I thought this would make an excellent angle to sort of approach this stuff from.
So essentially what we came up with was 10 bespoke lessons. So there's basically a scheme of work that underpins all of this. And for each of it, there's a sort of appropriate lesson title, there's quite detailed activities, linked resources, and then what we pinned this all on homework tasks. So the idea was that the students were creating a blog that was then almost like a diary of everything they did as they went through the process that they could then look back at. And it was almost like a piece of fieldwork write-up. There was a blog entry as a continuous stream.
One thing Paul mentioned earlier, I think it's probably worth pointing out, whilst we designed this as 10 lessons, it might well be something more like 20 lessons by the time you sort of work your way through it. So you can, to an extent, you can kind of dip in and out of these things. It might be, you have two lessons a week in your A-level class or something like that. You could do one of the lessons over. So you kind of use it how you wish, but this was the sort of how we kind of saw it as a sort of set of individual kind of discrete units of work within the scheme of it.
What we're going to do in the sort of second half is actually talk through some of the ones that we think are the best. And what it might be is you just simply take away those 2 or 3 things that were the best from it. So you can almost dip in, I know other teachers have pulled out some of it that's the kind of, I want to teach that skill and that bit's good, and take the instructions and use it and sort of ignore the rest. Equally, we've said that this is based around the health context. You could look at education. The census data is really broad. You could look at inequality of a variety of different things. Part of the reason we looked at health is because there was lots of media about it, and also we knew that the health had a really big disparity. So, just quickly going through the resources, we use WordPress. So we made a WordPress website that kind of hosts all the material. Some of that was based around Dropbox, and the majority of the sort of presentations and things were based on Google Drive. So again, it's all kind of open source. And
yeah, we'll give you the web link later. You can link to the resources directly from the Royal Geographical Society website, or if you go to, well, we'll show you the link later. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but yeah, all of the resources are kind of free and open. You can download them and use them sort of straight from the website.
Yeah, I guess one thing we want to say early on as well is that we wanted to see it as a feedback process. So maybe as a teacher you might have a go at something, and then there's on the WordPress website there's an email address that you can email us and say this didn't work, this was rubbish, or you can sort of give us back feedback on that.
Yeah, we very much would like feedback because this is a sort of an ongoing iterative process. These sort of things. We can have a stab, put something out there. If it doesn't work in the classroom, if this is too verbose or doesn't work as we intended it, then please let us know. We can tweak things and improve them.
So in terms of support, the lesson plans are pretty detailed. So someone who would be a complete novice, you don't have to have used the product at all, really. You could be learning this as the students are doing it. You could be doing it at the same time as them. So the instructions are pretty clear, linked through with the sort of resources and outcomes. What we have also tried to do is incorporate video instructions. So Adam filmed a lot of kind of like how-to videos that go along with it, and we thought that they were a good combination to go with the written instructions. So whereas normally you might have step by step and you kind of have death by these steps, you can also then combine that with a video where students often quite like this because then they can replay things and they can pause it and do it, and the combination of those written and video instructions seems to work.
I mean, one of the challenges of doing a piece of work like this is that sometimes there's no way around just learning the process to get from here's some data, here's a map. There's a series of steps that everyone has to go through to get to that, and kind of teaching that is quite tricky sometimes. And so we've tried to kind of mix up you have to go through these steps to get to this point with a sort of a video which kind of shows you a bit more interactively how to do it.
Because I think that also links with the way that we tried to set up the resources, was that it was then flexible for you as a teacher. So a student could go and do this and without any teacher actually learn it themselves. So there's the element of, you know, for homework or at home, they can then also explore this themselves. Equally, as a teacher, you could pull bits out and use that presentation or use that something else. So there's sort of flexibility in the way that you as a teacher might want to use it. So on the WordPress site, there are written instructions that kind of give an introduction, then there's tasks set out, and then there's all sort of linked diagrams and resources that have been annotated. Yeah, and then there's sort of PowerPoint presentations and worksheets that go with that as well. So there's quite a big base of material people use. So what we wanted to do was then, we've picked out between the two of us the kind of best examples and the things that we think you should really know about and we think are quite cool. So the first one is this.
Yeah, so accessing census data is sort of one of the key things. And this map here, so what we try and do in this essay is get you from what is effectively a spreadsheet with numbers on it to something as cool as this. So this is DataShine. This was produced by a friend of mine called Ollie O'Brien, who did work in CASA. He's now in the Department of Geography at UCL. DataShine effectively maps every single census data variable. In the top right here, you can choose different variables, and this will kind of map them on this kind of interactive online mapping facility. Now, DataShine is brilliant. It's great for kind of understanding census data, for sort of getting a feel for you know, different variables in parts of the country. It's fantastic. The problem is you're kind of constrained a little bit by what Ollie thinks is a good scale, or what Ollie thinks is kind of you know, the appropriate way to display the data in a particular part of the country. You can't really customize it that much. So what we were wanting to do with our resources is kind of show you how you can make something like this, but get from the kind of raw data to something akin to sort of DataShine, which, you know, visually is brilliant, and you know, it's quite, you know, it really kind of helps you kind of get a feel for the different sort of patterns within the kind of population in the UK.
Yeah, I think the thing with this DataShine is that there's nothing else quite like this, in the sense that it ties it to actual buildings. So it shows you all of the census data, but it puts it in the context of where people actually live, which is different to most of the maps you see, which would just be over a much larger geographical area. So it gives a much more kind of genuine context to it. This is really good for exploring around your school, or if you're looking at doing a piece of fieldwork in the UK somewhere. You can look and kind of get a real understanding of using this box at the top to explore all the census variables. So things like, I know around my school, it's really interesting looking at second home ownership, because obviously it's a boarding school, there's lots of teachers that live around the school, and so you've got a real density of people who have second homes within the UK. You can, you know, there's lots of really interesting things like that you can look at and explore through this DataShine. So back to the
yeah, so the first stage in creating a map like Ollie's, and the first stage everyone who sort of wants to start playing with census data has to go through is getting the data. And it can be a little bit kind of you know, where to start sometimes. There's a number of websites in the UK where you can get census data. Two of the most kind of popular are called Infuse, which is actually run here in Manchester, infuse.mymass.ac.uk. But the other,
sorry, that was Infuse.
Oh yeah, that was Infuse. Yeah, so Infuse is one kind of place you can get census data, but in the resources we produced, we decided to focus on Monis, which is basically University of Thurrock. It can be you know, this is a bit of an opaque website. To get the census data, you just have to click on a slightly kind of, you know, hidden away link halfway down the page. And in our resources, we kind of walk the students and the teachers through how to actually go from this website to getting a nice sort of spreadsheet of data that you can then combine with some boundary data from the Office of National Statistics, and then sort of create a map. So I think that's all I've got to say on that.
Yeah. No, I think we were wondering, should we show you those steps? But those steps are kind of clearly explained, and it's easy. You can pull data based around different thematic topics or around different geographical areas, so it's really easy to be able to get it at different scales. So that's one thing we were sort of thinking about, is you need to understand that the data comes at different scales, and that's part of the understanding. The second example was, we called it line with maps, and this one I think is really interesting because, again, it's this idea that students often are just presented with a map, or they're exploring data that's visualized through a website, and they don't really understand why those colours have been chosen or why that scale has been chosen, and this activity allows the students to kind of understand that and the sort of technique behind it. So,
yeah, so one of the problems with something like data shine is that choosing how you're going to colour the bits of your map according to the data that you have to hand, the decision's kind of made for you. With this library maps exercise, you actually try to explain how the data we have and how we display it, and the choices we make in terms of where we kind of draw the line in our, this is all of our data, and sort of where we kind of draw a line in terms of where we're going to colour it can have quite an influence on the patterns that are shown in the map that's produced at the end of it. So with library maps, we kind of, you actually get the students to play with the different kind of bin sizes. We kind of, these things here on Instagram with bins, and you can sort of play with the size of those. You can see how it can affect the story that you're telling with the data that you have. And I think that's quite an important concept to understand in sort of in GIS, but also in sort of cartography and sort of the display of spatial data generally. As well as kind of lining with maps in this way. So one of the other ways you can line with maps is by kind of altering your boundaries. So we've all seen these sort of scroll up a little bit. So this is a sort of standard world map, and the patterns that you see are kind of very much influenced by the size of the countries that are drawn. And so this is where the kind of cartograms that Danny Dorning and Ben Henning produced come into play. So we show you how you can get from a sort of standard map, a bit like this, and then how you can download a little bit of software that distorts the map for you, and then you can then, at the end of it, you can display a very nice one. You can actually display your custom-built cartogram at the end of it. So these are all sort of important concepts, I think, for students to get to grips with. But also, these are skills that are very easily learned, and you can produce these maps, in a once you've learned how to do it in sort of 5 or 10 minutes, something like that. It's really kind of it's quite empowering for students to be able to make these kind of things themselves and sort of look at how I can display my data.
I think with a lot of the activities, the steps are actually really simple, and it's that first stumbling block of having the time to kind of get your head around it. But it's just methodically following the instructions and watching the video. But once the students understand that, or once you understand that, the potential of this and so many of the other tools is really beneficial. Just within a few clicks, you can suddenly create a new map that sort of maps data. So the other thing that we have kind of incorporated with this is, I think, in terms of spatial data, most people would just think of the Ordnance Survey, but actually there's an open source alternative to the Ordnance Survey and all of the mapping data. So for this one, the students had sort of understood health inequalities and mapped the variation in health, and then the idea was to then compare that to the health provision. So we needed to source data to understand where the healthcare provision was for different parts of the UK. And you can get this from this OpenStreetMap.
So first thing we do is we get students to sort of zone in on the local authority where they're from, so this could be any local authority. And then we can pull in OpenStreetMap. So OpenStreetMap is an absolutely brilliant resource. It was invented by actually someone who used to be in CASA, interestingly enough. And it was kind of as a response to, I think, the kind of proprietary data that Ordnance Survey had, so there's a lot of data out there, sort of 10, 15 years ago. It was very difficult to get hold of good spatial data for free. Increasingly, the Ordnance Survey are putting more free stuff out there, but OpenStreetMap was a kind of an attempt to effectively kind of crowdsource good spatial data, and it's grown into sort of probably one of the most comprehensive spatial data sets in the world. But QGIS, there are tools within QGIS which allow you to pull out data from OpenStreetMap very, very easily. And in this case, we're looking at kind of healthcare provision in the area which is local to the school that you're interested in. So we were able to, we go here, so we can query the OpenStreetMap database to find out where the doctor's surgeries are in the local area, where the hospitals are, where things like dentists. You can look up fast food outlets if you're looking at things like obesity, and you can just run a very simple query in QGIS, and it will pull out this data. So here we've got, this is around Seven Oaks School, and we managed to pull out where the local hospitals are. We've got these are chemists, I think, and we've got doctor's surgeries and sort of these kind of things. So you can do an assessment very quickly, and then underlying this kind of the core of that map underneath this is the general health data from the census. So you can see where people are reporting worse health in the local area, and then how that corresponds to the provision of services that people report having need. So it's a very powerful thing to do, and actually, with things like QGIS, very easy to sort of get data on.
I think it was one of those, again, where a lot of what people are saying is, students need to be doing things that relate to the real world, that maybe people in the real world in employment might be doing. Well, this is an example of that. Yeah, as a local government, you might be looking at the provision of care. Is it in the right place? Is it appropriate? And that was what that was starting to get at. This, again, is quite exciting. This was more stats-based and statistical. And this is, again, a skill that seems to be pulled more and more into geography. One of the really cool things from this was looking at correlation. And it's something that we were joking about earlier. I think most schools still do in a paper-based way. Students are ranking data hand by hand on a bit of paper. There's not many schools who are probably ranking data using Excel and working out correlation in this way. So what this resource talks through is kind of Spinman's rank. But the idea is the data is much, much bigger than what students might be used to. So we got an example here.
Oh no, it's on the Excel at the bottom.
Here we are.
Yeah, so here we have the real census data. So this is the data that students have been using to understand health patterns in the UK and in the local area. But then kind of taking this data and kind of doing sort of some statistical analysis on it. So what could be the things that might be affecting poor health in different parts of the country? So if we take the very good health and we rank it, and we've got on the resources how to carry out this sort of ranking very quickly in a spreadsheet. You can do it in Excel, or you can do it in Google Sheets, or any of these kind of online free sort of spreadsheet packages. And then we can compare this with things, variables that could be influencing ill health. So we've got ones that don't at all. So things like having a religion, things like that. But also things like things like education and the hours that you work and the sort of percentage of unemployment, that kind of stuff. And again, so this is doing stuff with real data and kind of looking at patterns in real data rather than just a kind of a sort of stylized little example from a textbook.
So it was one of those examples where once you set up the formula and you just copy and paste and you drag it, it took minutes to then work out. We've got 350 local authorities there, we had 7 or 8 different variables, and just by copying and pasting, within minutes, we've worked out the correlation between all of these different variables. And it allows the students to, rather than wasting time kind of manually doing that process and then not getting to the geography bit, you can really quickly do that skill and then start exploring, well, actually, what is the correlation? Which one has the strongest correlation? And you can start to see those numbers on the bottom.
So after sort of Spinman's rank, we then, I think the next stage in the sort of statistical lesson was looking at sort of slightly more powerful kind of inferential statistics. So, for example, if we have a percentage of people in an area with poor health, can we use the percentage of people who are employed to predict that? And so we sort of show you how to kind of carry out these sort of scatter plots, drawing a sort of line of best fit or a regression line through them, and then explaining how this thing that sort of pops up sometimes in Excel, when you draw your line of best fit and you get this kind of equation pop up, what this actually means and how we can use this. This is the regression equation, how we can use it to then predict what people's health might be like in particular parts of the country based on these other variables. So it's kind of taking it a step further. This is the sort of stuff that undergrads do, but actually it's not that difficult conceptually to understand. Because if one goes up and the other one goes up, then there might be something going on there.
I think the other strength of this as well is that often A-level students are still using quite meaningless, almost fake data, and they would never be using that many variables or points. And the idea is trying to move them into the real world and get them to use messy data and data that actually means something, because then they buy into the process more. They're actually exploring something that is real and exists, rather than something that has just been plucked out of the air or given to them that doesn't really mean anything.
And this is what kind of policymakers in governments do all over the country. So they will be using this very data. They will be looking at these very patterns to decide, where in my city am I going to want to, build a new hospital, or where am I going to want to close, hospitals. So these are skills that you can learn in school, but they're very transferable to the real world, and people are doing this kind of stuff in the real world all the time. And so it's quite important. But, and because it's not unachievable, I think we can start to teach this in schools.
This last example, the last example we're going to show you, was that often, particularly with field work, again, it goes back to this idea that they're looking at data that other people are presenting, and so you get really bad screenshots of a map or really bad screenshots of something else with inappropriate bits of data or without a key. And what this does is it shows students how to create, relatively easily, through following these instructions, their own maps that show appropriate data with a scale, a key, and the colours are sort of appropriate.
This is sort of showing, bad health by local authority, then zooming in on sort of, South Wales, which is one of the worst kind of health outcomes, and looking at the kind of the more fine-grained kind of spatial patterning of poor health in South Wales. But the QGIS again is fantastic. You can produce these lovely kind of rich, kind of high-resolution map documents. You can spend as long as you like on this. If you want to tweak your kind of legends and the colours and stuff, general labelling if you want, but actually you can do it quite quickly. You can produce something that looks nice very quickly, and it can be used in coursework, be used in that sort of stuff.
So just to sort of finish, this was our kind of wall of fame. This was, if you're interested in GIS, quantitative skills, and this sort of area, these are some of the big academic players who are quite regularly tweeting really interesting stuff.
Twitter's a good place to kind of pick up on sort of things that people are doing. So this sort of rogue gallery is sort of mainly my mates who are doing this sort of stuff in universities across the UK. But all these people will tweet fairly regularly the sort of stuff that they're putting out, and it's worth sort of following their feeds and just seeing, Ollie O'Brien all the time is putting up a new kind of version of data showing there's new data on it and things like that, and he'll tweet about it. And it's worth following these people just to sort of keep up to date with the sorts of things that, the state of the art, if you like, with what's going on with sort of GIS and kind of data visualization in the UK, and you can sort of bring it into teaching quite regularly.
We were talking about earlier. So James Cheshire published this book called The Information Capital. I think there was a few other authors involved. But that's a really good one about London, and it maps in a really interesting way. I think the other good thing with him is that he shows different ways to present stuff. That's with a lot of these people. They show kind of innovative and interesting ways to present data that you maybe haven't thought of or students haven't seen before. Benjamin Henging is with the sort of cartography maps. What was it you were saying that Hannah is from your office?
Yeah, Hannah's a sort of mathematician but does a lot of sort of spatial kind of stuff. Alistair Ray produces a lot of really nice QGIS things. So it's really sort of inspiration in terms of sort of getting ideas. But I mean, I follow these guys and nick their ideas all the time.
The kind of next step from this is the RGS are really interested in developing quantitative skills, and so they've just launched this whole data qualitative project, and there's a whole load of projects going on around the country. I think there's one based with the RGS, and then we're going to host a CPD day, extremely cheap because it's sort of backed by the RGS compared to some of the ones that you might have to pay for. And the idea is it's going to be some examples of stuff that we as a school have been doing, but also there's going to be a big focus on the academic element. And we were talking there's three.
Yeah, so I'm going to be there teaching a bit of QGIS. John Reeds and James Millington from King's College Department of Geography are going to be there. James is a physical geographer, so he's going to be doing some physical geography stuff. John's a bit of a polymath really, but he's going to be doing sort of capturing your own data with sort of GPS stuff, and then how to analyse that in GIS afterwards, sort of thing. So, and I think there's going to be another CPD day that sort of was part of the same thing in Portsmouth at some point. But the RGS, the Data Skills and Geography website will have sort of details. We haven't finalised the Portsmouth one yet, but this one's definitely happening on the 30th of June. So if you want to come along and sort of, get sort of stuck in, get your hands dirty with it, then we can.
And then the last thing was, there's obviously a Twitter feed for this as well, and we've been using it as a way to kind of update on what's been released. Maybe one thing we've not done is talked about where you can access this.
No.
So the web address.
There's the web address on the bottom.
Yeah, censusgis.wordpress.com. But yeah, you can access it through the RGS website as well. That was pretty much the last thing we were going to say.
Okay, yeah. So if there's any questions, we're happy to sort of answer questions and queries. And,
how many people in this room are using, sorry, I'll come back to the question. How many people in this room are using anything like what we're talking about, or are anywhere near any of this? Does anyone feel like they're close? What are people doing if they're not doing this?
We would use the data rather than be presenting the data in the way that you've just shown us.
So is that using Excel?
Census data and using the health data that exists for the various different wards and things like that.
Sorry, is that you manipulating it, or are you just viewing it? Or?
It's already, you can access, I can't think of the website off the top of my head, you can already access it, can't you, for all the different health measures for kind of town, ward, region and what have you. So they would do analysis of what's already presented, which is what you're saying, that the opportunities are there for them to actually take a bit more of a lead on producing some of those graphs, and they'd enjoy it. Is the data shine free and you can just access it?
Yeah, data shine's I think datashine.org is the web address. That's it's pretty robust as well. I think you can handle lots of people logging on. It falls down occasionally, but I think Ollie's sort of fix it. But yeah, datashine's great. Have a play with datashine. It's really good fun.
As the 2011 census sort of seeds from memory, obviously the usefulness, looking at data from then, it's not so useful, not so relevant, obviously, for the students. Is that something you're worried about, particularly as the government said that the 2011 census might be the last one in this sort of format?
Yeah. There is actually going to be a 2021 census now,
there is.
But it's going to be online only. So there's going to be a lot of work for academics kind of filling in the gaps of that, because they're not going to get 100% coverage. It is that is the problem inherent with all census data. There is sort of the further away you get from the data that's collected, potentially the less relevant a lot of the stuff is. Although what you find is, if you look over time. The picture in the UK is remarkably stable. So areas where you have poor health and areas where you have kind of deprivation tend, on the whole, you do get a bit of change, but on the whole,
well, except migration, for example, where the changes have been colossal, and that's got huge implications for the provision of services.
Yeah, I mean, so for things like international migration, the census has always been pretty terrible, because it's just a single snapshot in time, and the volatility in migration is massive. The thing is, what we're teaching here, these are effectively sort of data skills. We're using the 2011 census as a sort of vehicle for this, and a lot of the patterns that are shown are sort of relevant and will remain relevant for a certain amount of time, although the further away you get. But actually, these data skills can be transferred to any other data set that's online, and actually there's increasingly kind of free availability of spatial data sets which are kind of linked to this kind of national spatial hierarchy that the Office for National Statistics kind of oversee. As the years go on, the patterns themselves might be less relevant, but you could apply this to the next census or to any other new data set that comes up. So it's an issue, but hopefully, hopefully it's not going to date too rapidly. Hopefully. Yeah.
This is all England and Wales, is it? Not Scotland.
Yeah, there was a bit of a problem with the Scottish census data this time around, because for whatever reason, they weren't able to get their results out as quickly as England and Wales. We are in the process of producing this for Scotland as well. So Celia McIntyre, who is, I think she sort of heads up the census in Scotland. I had a meeting with her last week. She saw this and was like, this is brilliant, can you do this for Scotland? So we're going to be developing this for Scotland, because Scotland have got their own web portal for accessing Scottish data. And we're hopefully going to run some training days up in Scotland as well with this stuff, but with the sort of the Scottish version of this. It will probably be, I guess, the autumn by the time the sort of the Scottish bits of this will be completed. So yeah, but at the moment it's England and Wales. Don't ask me about Northern Ireland, because that's a whole other kettle of fish.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Cheers.